Hey y'all, I'm coming to you from my home office, and behind me is the failed green screen. Hopefully I'm going to have it up and running so that we can do some really wacky stuff, because just since we have to be online doesn't mean that this class has to go downhill, right? I still want to have a lot of fun, and we're just going to do what we can to make this class as cool as possible under the current circumstances. So one of the problems I have with video recordings is, believe it or not, I'm actually very camera shy. So I am going to try to appear in some of these videos to give them a little bit of a human element, but this is also me going out of my comfort zone to do that. So hopefully you don't think I'm too much of a dork. It just happens. What I want to do now is I want to kind of journey to the center of the cell. So here I have a model of an animal cell. Normally it would look like this, with that plasma membrane or cell membrane going all the way around that cell. Now, in this case, in this model, the cell is actually open so that we can look at it. Now, if we zoom into that plasma membrane, remember that this is going to be those there we go, let's get that out of the way. This is going to be those hydrophilic heads and those hydrophobic tails coming together and creating that semi-permeable layer that we learned about before the long break. Once we're inside of this cell, we've got to learn the names of a couple things. The first one of those things that I want you to learn about is the cytosol. Now, what the cytosol is that includes, or that's the like liquid in the cell. It's basically what's supporting all the crud inside of the cell. It's sort of floating around in this, you can almost imagine like a zero-G type environment. Maybe I've been watching a little bit too much of shows about space on Netflix lately, but they're basically floating within this cell, and they're in this kind of goo. Okay, once we talk about the goo with all the stuff in it, so everything that's highlighted here in that kind of turquoise color, now we're talking about the cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is the goo plus all the organelles. Now, what are the organelles? Organelles are all of these sort of structures in here. And that name organelle, it kind of sounds like little organ. Here, let me actually highlight all the organelles. There we go. There's all the organelles highlighted. So all of these structures in teal are organelles. And the name comes from little organ because these are sort of what does all the things that keep the cell alive. Cells are neat. They're like a little miniature animal. Remember, there are even single cellular organisms. And what they're going to be doing is they're going to be making energy for the cell, and they're going to be getting rid of waste for the cell, and they're going to be making things that the cell needs to survive, and processing those things. And all of this is going to sort of be part of how the cell keeps alive and maintains itself. And later we're going to learn how cells divide and make more cells. And when we look at plant cells have an additional structure, and this would be called a cell wall. This is outside of the cell membrane, and it is going to allow the plants to have a little extra structure, which actually makes them more resistant to sort of swelling and wilting in the face of a lot of water, among other things. It gives trees their strength. You'll notice here, this is a bacterium, which is also a cell, and this bacterium has a cell wall. The cell wall, much like the plant cell wall, gives it structure. But the interesting thing here is that we use this bacterial cell wall as a target for antibiotics. So the neat thing here is, since we can target cell walls of bacteria with antibiotics, that means that the bacteria will get killed off by the antibiotics, but the antibiotics will not affect our cells, because remember, our cells do not have a cell wall. Some of you may be wondering why we're not using antibiotics to fight coronavirus. Well, the way a virus works is the virus injects itself into your cells. And since it's injecting itself in your cells, it's using your cellular machinery to reproduce itself. Your cells do not have cell walls. And since they do not have cell walls, the antibiotics have nothing to target. So instead of using an antibiotic, you would have to use an antiviral. You may also have heard of antibiotic resistant bacteria. Well, the cell walls can develop different adaptations which make them less permeable to the antibiotics, which means that those antibiotics become less effective. All right, so this concludes our sort of first episode, which is just the basics about what's inside of a cell. In the next episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start talking about organelles and what kinds of organelles there are, what cells they would be in, what cells they wouldn't be in, and what they do for the cell. I'll see you guys in the next video.